Chinese fireball. After Professor Kettleburn had happily fiddled with his new prosthetic for a while, he suddenly seemed to remember something. "Come take a look at this, Xiao Ada," he called. He picked up the briefcase that had been set aside and laid it gently on the table. Vincent watched, puzzled, as Kettleburn opened the lid. Inside, a thick layer of soft cloth wrapped around a round object. The professor pushed the cloth aside and revealed an egg-shaped object. "Is it a dragon egg?" Vincent blurted. "A Chinese fireball egg," Kettleburn said simply. "I traded a large piece of fresh dragon hide for it." Chinese fireballs were an eastern species of dragon, rare even among dragons. Vincent had seen a number on his travels in the East. For Kettleburn, a creature-obsessed man who loved dangerous, large, and aggressive beasts, this was a true treasure. Vincent's eyes lingered on the egg for a moment before he asked, a little bluntly, "Professor, why did you bring this out? Is it just to show off?" Kettleburn smiled, but didn't answer directly. He carefully placed the egg back in the briefcase and covered it with the cloth. "That's only half the reason," he said. "And the other half?" "For the other half, I'm not sure how to deal with it. I just heard the Ministry of Magic is tracking a missing Chinese fireball egg." Vincent froze. He had nearly forgotten that privately possessing a dragon egg in Britain was illegal, probably because he was used to doing a number of illegal things. "So this is the egg the Ministry lost?" he asked. Kettleburn blinked. "I doubt it." Vincent had no reply to that. He only thought, not for the first time, how colorful the retired professor's life must be. With a resigned shrug, he glanced back at the professor. This is inconvenient, he thought, but he couldn't refuse the professor. "All right," Vincent said. "I'll take care of the dragon egg. Chinese fireball egg powder is a valuable medicinal ingredient." Kettleburn's expression changed at once and he cut him off, nervous. "No, Vincent, this egg is alive. It's incubating. Don't even think about doing anything improper with it." "Fine." Vincent sounded mildly annoyed, but agreed. Despite his promise, he still planned, privately, to grind off a token amount later, an ounce at most. After Vincent affirmed he would look after it, Kettleburn seemed relieved. He stood, stretched, and gave the briefcase a final, worried glance. "All right, Xiaowei," he said as he headed for the door. "I need to find someone who can help me sort this out. In the meantime, you must take good care of it. It should hatch in about a week. Make sure to contact me then." Seeing how worried the professor was, Vincent pressed, "Professor, why aren't you looking after it yourself? You're the expert." Kettleburn bristled. "The ministry already searched my home. How dare they suspect a newly retired old professor? I can't believe it." Vincent let out a dry laugh and didn't argue. If he were investigating, he'd have focused on Kettleburn too. "Don't worry, Professor," Vincent said at last. "I'll hide it safely, and if there's any problem with your prosthetic, write to me." Once Kettleburn left, Vincent stared at the egg on the table. About a week, he thought. Suddenly the egg shook. He moved closer without thinking, reached out and touched the shell. It was cool to the touch. No wonder it was struggling. Dragon eggs need intense heat to hatch. As if sensing him, the egg thrashed violently, nearly rolling off the table. "High temperature, huh?" Vincent murmured, closing the box and carrying it down to the plantation. The entrance to the plantation was through shed number 3. Making the door movable had proved a smart choice, given how large the grounds were. Inside, he found Lupin crouched in the poisonous Dirk Cresswell bed, carefully harvesting. After everything that had happened, Lupin's movements were cautious. His hands were sheathed in thick dragon-hide gloves, and his arms were wrapped to prevent contact with the plant's toxins. Poisonous Dirk Cresswell is at its most medicinal when it reaches maturity, like humans at their prime. As it ages, its properties fade. For that reason, Vincent immediately processed newly harvested Dirk Cresswell into essence of Murtlap. Well, in this case, poisonous Dirk Cresswell essence. Turning the herb into essence greatly amplifies its potency and extends its shelf life almost indefinitely when stored correctly. Vincent planted a batch every year and had built up a substantial stockpile of both essences. Essence of Murtlap was commonly used. He hadn't found a regular use for poisonous Dirk Cresswell essence yet, but he preferred to be prepared. Lupin looked up as Vincent approached. He carefully placed the harvested plants into his basket, then shifted his gaze to the briefcase in Vincent's hands. "What's that?" Lupin asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. What did you bring? 22. Flamewood. Professor Kettleburn gave me a difficult problem. Vincent opened the box in front of Lupin and revealed its contents. There was no need for secrecy. Lupin's eyes widened when he saw the dragon egg inside. A dragon egg, he murmured. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Where did it come from? Vincent tapped the egg's surface. A Chinese fireball. Kettleburn entrusted it to me, and the hatching date is only a few days away. Lupin knew Professor Kettleburn well. He had been care of magical creatures at Hogwarts when Lupin was a student. Hearing the egg was about to hatch, he stepped closer to inspect it. This is trouble, he said. Naturally. Vincent sighed. And it gets worse. The Ministry is looking for this little darling. Lupin frowned and looked from the egg to Vincent. Then why not hand it over? It's only a dragon egg. Precious, yes, but something the Ministry should handle. Then Kettleburn would kill me. Vincent chuckled. He's only storing it here with me temporarily. I won't say anything, Lupin said seriously. I knew you wouldn't. Vincent smiled faintly. Lupin appreciated the trust. It was a good feeling. When Lupin reached out to touch the shell, Vincent stopped him. Careful, he warned. You just brushed something poisonous. Better safe than sorry, Lupin thought, and let his hand hover. How are you going to keep it? Vincent drew his wand and muttered several scouring charms over himself. He motioned for Lupin to follow. We need to put it somewhere more suitable. What does a dragon need to hatch? Heat. They left shed number 3 and moved into shed number 2. Lupin had only been near its doorway before. He knew it mostly held trees of many species. Vincent led him further inside, veering left. Lupin glanced around. Where are we going? To a place more suited to a dragon, Vincent answered. As he spoke, a blast of scorching air hit them. There. Ahead stood a giant tree, tower-like and straight, its branches thriving. At the top, clusters of brilliant red flowers crowded the crown. They looked like tulips, but they were aflame. No, actual flames licked each petal. Lupin watched the air shimmer with heat waves where the flowers burned. He rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't imagining it. The temperature itself proved otherwise. Even from a distance, the heat was almost unbearable. Vincent explained, It's a flame tree. I transplanted it from Africa, and after my mutation ability, it picked up the burning trait. He pulled out a small tag and read aloud, as if to himself. Species flame tree, level 2, trait burning, status growing 22%. Best not to get any closer, Vincent said. The temperature seemed higher than his last visit. If the tree kept growing, it might soon make the whole shed feel like a volcanic crater. Fortunately, the shed was tall and well secured. Vincent levitated the dragon egg from the box with a soft charm and floated it beneath the flame tree, where the heat was perfect for hatching. The moment the egg settled, its shell flushed bright red and began to vibrate slightly. Is it going to cook? Lupin asked, wiping sweat from his brow. No. Vincent smiled. It won't cook. Dragons thrive in heat. As long as the temperature doesn't exceed their tolerance, they develop better. Lupin nodded, again amazed by Vincent's plants and their strange properties. Should we tell Harry about this? Why not? Vincent said. Every wizard ought to learn a bit about dragons. Nearly every part of one, scales, bones, teeth, has value. He brushed dust off his robes and turned to go. Come on, Lupin, we have other work to finish. 6 days later, the egg hatched. The newly born dragon was lively and immediately began tearing at a small branch of the flame tree, which made Vincent wince. Dragons, whether to wizards or muggles, had irresistible appeal. Harry was no exception. He came nearly every day to peer under the flame tree. He soon lost interest, though. The hatchling was ugly and badly mannered, a hopping, snarling brat that was hard to like. Professor Kettleburn, of course, found it charming. Newly hatched dragons require care, and Vincent wasn't eager to be the primary nurse. Harry was still too young, and Lupin had his regular duties. So the job of looking after the baby dragon fell to the devil's snare. Fortunately, the hatchling couldn't breathe fire yet, so it couldn't burn its guardian. Professor Kettleburn came by when it hatched and gave it a name, Torch. Vincent suspected Kettleburn named it after the flame tree, having lingered by the tree for a long time while the dragon grew. Kettleburn left the dragon in Vincent's care, continuing to oversee its fostering. 23. Harry's birthday. By mid to late July, the days were flying by. Harry kept counting. Any time now, he should get his Hogwarts acceptance letter. He couldn't focus on potions. Every 10 minutes, he'd glance out the window, hoping an owl would land with an envelope. Because of that, Vincent had canceled Harry's potions class. It was noon on July 24th when Harry came into Vincent's shop as usual. He hurried straight to the counter. Vincent was watering the potted plants on the shelves. Since Lupin had started helping in the shop, he had more free time and even managed to fuss over the flowers. The calm felt a little strange to him after so many busy days. "Teacher," Harry panted, breathless. "I got a letter today. An owl brought it, but my aunt grabbed it and tore it up before I could read it. It must have been the Hogwarts letter." Vincent set the watering can down and pressed his hands together to calm the boy. "Relax, Harry. This isn't the end of the world." Harry's face fell. "Does that mean I can't go to Hogwarts?" Vincent couldn't help smiling at how upset Harry looked. He had meant only to spook him a little, but he wouldn't frighten a child for real. He sat on the chair behind the counter. "Don't worry. Hogwarts makes sure every student receives an acceptance letter. If you never read the contents, they'll send more." "Then I can still get it?" Harry asked, hope rekindling. "Of course," Vincent nodded. Harry exhaled a long, relieved sigh and believed him without hesitation. Then Vincent changed tack. "But you'll need your guardian's consent to go." Harry's expression darkened again. "They'll never agree." Vincent crouched, rubbed Harry's hair, and spoke earnestly. "Not necessarily, Harry. Trust me, no one wants to keep someone they dislike around. You just need to make them dislike you more, or be afraid of you." Harry considered the suggestion. A sly look lit Vincent's face. "If you don't know how, I can help. One flick of a wand and the problem's solved." Harry hesitated. "No, teacher. Isn't it illegal to do magic in front of muggles?" Vincent looked surprised. "When did I teach you that? Who told you not to cast spells in front of muggles?" "Mr. Lupin," Harry said, glancing up nervously. "He said the Ministry of Magic handles these things, like the police here. But don't worry, I haven't told him that you've used magic on my aunt before." Vincent waved a hand and put his finger to his lips. "Shh, no one else will know." He wasn't one to follow the Ministry's rules slavishly. If magic could fix something, why not use it? Seeing Vincent's calm, Harry relaxed. "I'll get the letter," he promised. Over the next few days, Harry stopped coming to the shop. Lupin noticed it too and found it odd. Harry didn't like potions, but he rarely missed class. "Aren't you worried?" Lupin asked Vincent as he watched him calmly stirring a brew among the plants. "Harry hasn't shown up in days. Probably tied up by his aunt and uncle," Vincent said without much concern. "If you're so bothered, go check on him, although I expect you won't be popular with the Dursleys." Lupin watched the pot bubble. "What are you brewing?" Vincent kept his eyes on the cauldron. "Secret. It's a birthday present for Harry." Lupin blinked. "Birthday present? When's his birthday?" Vincent glanced at the calendar on the counter. "If I remember right, today." Lupin stared at the calendar. Today's date was circled in red. "Today? Why didn't he tell me?" Vincent cocked an eyebrow. "Maybe because he doesn't like you." Lupin gave an awkward laugh. "I doubt that. An 11th birthday was important for a wizard. Their magic matured and formal training could begin. Vincent wouldn't forget to prepare something. "Is it too late for me to find a gift?" Lupin asked. Vincent added the last ingredient, then looked out the window. "I don't think you can, unless you turn back time." He and Lupin followed his gaze. Two figures were walking toward the shop. One small, the other huge. The smaller one was unmistakably Harry. Vincent had hardly finished tidying when a sharp knock sounded at the door. Moments later, the door pushed open and Harry dashed in, face alight with excitement. "Teacher, I got it!" he panted, thrusting an envelope into Vincent's hand. The Hogwarts crest was stamped on it. "Congratulations, Harry," Vincent said, smiling, reaching for the letter. At the doorway, a large shape tried to squeeze in, ducking under the frame and banging his head. "Hiss!" He rubbed his forehead, then blinked at the people inside the shop. Anyone here?" Harry said. "Ah, it's you, Professor Vincent and Lupin?" Hagrid froze, astonished. 24. Hagrid's arrival. "Hagrid?" Vincent called when he saw the giant standing in the doorway, looking a little lost. "Why are you here? Come in, quick!" Hagrid didn't bother with formalities. He strode into the shop and flopped down on a sofa with a long, protesting creak. Harry watched them both, puzzled by how comfortable they seemed with each other. "You two know each other?" he asked. "Of course, little Harry," Hagrid said, leaning back and putting a bit more weight on the poor sofa. "Professor Vincent and I go back a long way. This year, Professor Vincent will be at Hog." "Ahem." Vincent cut him off with a cough and a conspiratorial wink. "Best keep some surprises," he said. Harry didn't know yet that Vincent would be teaching at Hogwarts. Vincent had decided to tell him once they were at the school. Hagrid got the hint and fell silent. Harry, still curious, looked between them. "What about? About being a teacher?" Hagrid cleared his throat, a little stiff now. "Oh, nothing, Harry. We were just talking about old times. Professor Vincent and I have known each other a long while. He used to be a student at Hogwarts, too, and I'm the keeper of keys and grounds there." Vincent thought to himself that Hagrid had never been very good at keeping secrets. Harry was bemused, but didn't press it. The excitement of Hogwarts, the acceptance letter still warm in his mind, kept him distracted. Hagrid, however, suddenly changed the subject. "Vincent, why do you know Harry? He even called you Professor." "I've been living here," Vincent said. "About half a year ago I met Harry. He's very keen on potions, so I gave him a bit of private instruction." Hagrid looked at Harry, and Harry nodded, though he felt very keen on potions was putting it mildly. What he hadn't expected was Hagrid's reaction. The giant moved as if the name potions had unlocked something inside him. He rubbed his eyes, reached out, and affectionately tousled Harry's already messy hair. "Oh, you're fond of potions, are you?" "Little Harry," he said, almost on the verge of tears. Harry's hair became messier than ever. "You must have a real talent for it," Hagrid went on excitedly, "just like your mother." The single word hung in the air. Time seemed to slow for Harry. "My mother?" he said, stunned. "You knew my mother?" Hagrid's face shifted. He'd said more than he should have, and now he looked for a way to put it back. Yes, Harry. She was at Hogwarts when I was there. She was top of her year in potions. Couldn't be beat." Harry's heart jumped. This was the first time anyone had said anything about his parents to him. Vincent glanced over at Lupin, who of everyone present knew Harry's parents best, and watched him for any sign of reaction, his own expression grave but silent. Before Harry could ask another question, a high-pitched chewing noise came from under Vincent's feet. He looked down to find a tiny dragon, no bigger than a large cat, gnawing on a stool leg. Its milk teeth left little crescent marks in the wood. "Hey! Don't do that, Torch!" Vincent scolded. He scooped the hatchling up and clamped its mouth shut with both hands. "I suppose I ought to teach you some manners, you little rascal." "Wait," Hagrid roared, suddenly as loud and excited as a bell. "Is that a dragon? Vincent, is it?" Vincent inwardly cursed his luck. He'd forgotten how Hagrid, like Professor Kettleburn, was utterly, hopelessly in love with dragons. Hagrid sprang up and hurried over so fast he nearly sent the sofa flying. The hatchling Torch stopped squirming the instant the giant loomed over them. Hagrid's presence seemed to overwhelm even a dragon's bravado. "Vincent, I can't believe you're keeping a dragon," Hagrid breathed, eyes huge. "Oh, that's marvelous. Surprising and marvelous. And it's a Chinese fireball," he added, as if naming the species was the most natural thing in the world. Vincent admired Hagrid's certainty. If it had been him, he wouldn't have been able to tell one hatchling from another. He hugged Torch a little closer, half afraid Hagrid might try to take him. "It's very small, only just hatched," Vincent explained. "But yes, a dragon. I've been looking after him." Hagrid's face melted into an expression of pure adoration as he peered into the tiny dragon's eyes. "I've always wanted to raise a dragon," he said. "He's lovely." "Do you want to hold him?" Vincent asked, seeing Hagrid practically glowing. Hagrid's grin could have melted iron. He reached out and took Torch with the reverence of someone holding a delicate treasure. The hatchling struggled a bit at first, then gave up entirely, swallowed by Hagrid's enormous hands. "Oh, he's so tiny, and he's not frightened of me at all," Hagrid cooed. "Have you been feeding him brandy and chicken blood?" "Of course," Vincent said, picking up a dog-eared book from the table, Dragon Breeding for Pleasure and Profit. "It's in here." "I've read that one," Hagrid said eagerly. "If I ever get the chance, I must raise one properly." For the next half hour, Hagrid scarcely talked about anything else. He fussed over Torch, compared notes with Vincent on proper dragon care, and every few minutes, Harry got lost in the easy, warm exchange between them. It was only when Hagrid suddenly straightened, like someone remembering an appointment, that he remembered why he had come. "I need to take Harry to Diagon Alley," Hagrid announced. "He won't come unless you say it's all right." Vincent felt a small, surprising tug of pride. He hadn't expected Harry to trust him so much. "Of course," he said, smiling at Harry. "Hagrid's a good friend." After Harry and Hagrid had gone, Vincent walked slowly to the window and watched them disappear into the crowd. He remembered, with a mild start, that he had meant to give Harry a birthday present before they left. He hadn't. No matter. He could send it with his owl to the Dursleys. 25. Birthday gift. Harry had never seen so many magical things. He felt lightheaded all the way back to Privet Drive after Diagon Alley. The only regret was that he'd forgotten to ask Hagrid about his parents, but there would be time for that later. Because of something he'd done recently, the Dursleys had finally moved him out of the cupboard and into his cousin Dudley's small bedroom. Lying in bed that night, Harry felt his life didn't seem so unbearable anymore. He had a proper bed, a wand, Hedwig, and a teacher who cared about him. He might even get to go to Hogwarts soon. What would life at Hogwarts be like? He thought about it for a while and then sank into a deep sleep. Knock, knock, knock. Early the next morning, he was woken by tapping at the window. Rubbing his eyes, he looked out and saw an owl with a slightly crooked beak pecking at the dusty glass. Harry sat up. "It's Vincent's owl." He scrambled out of bed, opened the window, and let the bird into the room. Under the owl's impatient stare, he took an exquisitely wrapped box and a letter from its talon. The letter was, of course, from Vincent. The note said, "Harry, happy birthday. Sorry the gift is a little late. I had to make some special preparations, and I had to be away from Privet Drive for a day. Please read the instructions that came with your present carefully. Adrian Wisen." Heart pounding, Harry set the letter down and examined the box. He hadn't expected a present from Vincent at all. It was a complete surprise. Inside the box was a small bottle filled with a murky black liquid and a scrap of paper tucked beneath it. The note read, "Remember the biting cabbage I gave you? Try adding this potion the next time you water it." "Biting cabbage?" Harry said aloud. He glanced at the bedside table. There, in a cracked flower pot, the biting cabbage was planted, its mouth buried in the soil, sleeping. 2 days ago, it had helped him get the Hogwarts letter from the Dursleys, leaving his uncle with several new scars. Since then, no one in the house had dared touch the pot. Harry felt a burst of affection for the little plant, and a flinch of worry. What if the Dursleys forced him out because of it? He shook his head. He still had Vincent on his side. As he approached, the cabbage perked up and bared its sharp teeth at him. It relaxed and tucked itself back into the soil as soon as it recognized his scent. After all, he watered it every day. Harry breathed easier. He fetched an old watering can from the utility cupboard, filled it, and poured the potion into the water. The liquid spread through the water with a hiss. The surface first took on a faint gray tinge, then slowly reddened to a deep scarlet color like fresh blood. A metallic tang filled the air. Harry pinched his nose. "Is this really a potion?" he murmured. He'd been studying potions with Vincent for some time, but he couldn't tell what this one was. In truth, it was a tonic Vincent had brewed to promote growth and mutation in plants. The main ingredient was Vincent's own blood. His magic lent itself to plant mutation, and his blood made a potent carrier. For the biting cabbage, it would be the perfect tonic. The cabbage's leaves trembled as it caught the scent. The stronger the smell, the more excited it became. It wrenched itself free of the pot and lunged for the watering can. "Don't be hasty, little fellow," Harry said, holding the can out, but the cabbage wasn't having it. It bit off the spout and drank straight from the mouth of the can. Harry stared. He'd forgotten the thing actually had a mouth. In seconds, it had swallowed every drop. When it gulped the last of the potion, it suddenly stilled. It slid back into the pot, its leaves softening, and buried its head in the soil as if in a deep, contented sleep. Is that it?" Harry asked the empty room. He had been expecting something dramatic, some obvious change, but the large canful of tonic had disappeared into such a small plant. He crouched and poked its leaves gently. There was no reaction. After a few minutes trying to rouse it, he gave up. He didn't want to pull it out of the soil and risk harming whatever development was happening. Just then, the bedroom door flew open and Vernon Dursley stormed in. "Get up and get to work, you little." His voice cracked with anger. "I didn't keep you here to sleep the day away." Harry shrank back. He was always afraid of his uncle, but seeing the fresh scars on Vernon's face made some of that fear shift into an odd, guilty satisfaction. Vernon's eyes flicked to the flower pot on the bedside table, and he flinched. The scars throbbed. "You'd better get rid of that biting thing you're keeping," he snapped, panting. "Or I'll call the police." Then he backed out, slammed the door, and left Harry sitting there, stunned. Harry didn't know whether the police would do anything against a magical plant. If anyone would, it would be the Ministry of Magic. Maybe, he thought, he should ask Vincent if he could take the cabbage to him tomorrow. That thought made him feel immediately safer. 26. Shopping. While Harry fiddled with the birthday present Vincent had given him, Vincent was already in Diagon Alley. He headed for the magical creatures shop on the south side, the place where most first years picked up owls, fire crabs, and puffskeins. The shop was one of Britain's most popular pet stores, with branches everywhere. "Welcome." A female shop assistant greeted him as he came in. "Do you need a pet? We just got a new batch of owls today." Vincent shook his head. "No, thank you. I'm not here to buy a pet. Is the owner in?" The woman hesitated, then brightened. "Sir, tell me what you need. If you must see the owner, I can send for her." She blinked, then peered at him closely. "Ah, could you be Mr. Vincent?" When he nodded, she looked relieved. "You should have said so earlier, Mr. Vincent. Ms. Roskin is in the back room." "Thank you." The assistant led him down a short corridor to a wooden door. "Miss Roskin, Mr. Vincent is here." "Please come in," a clear voice answered. Vincent entered into a simple little office, a table, 2 chairs, and several animal portraits on the walls, one of them showing a horned beast. The woman at the table had clearly been buried in paperwork. She had slightly curly black hair and wore a neat gray robe. She looked about Vincent's age, younger than he'd expected for the owner of such a successful shop. He found himself a little impressed. "Mr. Vincent, hello." She rose and extended her hand with a smile. After a quick shake, Vincent went straight to business. He'd already paid a considerable deposit. "Ms. Roskin, pleased to meet you. Did you receive my order?" "Of course." Roskin rifled through a heap of parchments and produced a crumpled sheet. She smoothed it, read it, and then laughed in disbelief. "To be honest, when I first saw your order, I thought it was a joke. I nearly threw it away." "You can't get some of them?" Vincent asked, trying not to sound disappointed. Roskin gave a soft, incredulous chuckle. "Look at what you wrote. Murtlap, Diracol, Fooper. Those are ordinary. But what do you mean by toxic horned beast and horned serpent at the end? Do you want me thrown into Azkaban?" Vincent had expected that answer. He hadn't really hoped to buy the last 2 creatures here. Even if Roskin could procure them, he wouldn't have the funds, nor would he feel safe displaying them around Hogwarts. He'd come to gather animals for the Care of Magical Creatures class. Many of the items on his list were legitimate class materials. "If you can hide it from the Ministry of Magic." Roskin paused, winked, then added, "I'm only joking." Vincent wasn't sure she was entirely joking, but he let it go. "Right, besides the last 2, can you supply everything else on the list?" Roskin scanned the parchment again and smiled confidently. "Yes, the rest are all fine. Are you sure you want everything? That's a sizable sum of galleons." "All of it," Vincent said, satisfied. "Send the bill to Hogwarts." At that exact moment, far away at the castle, Dumbledore sneezed violently. With the transaction completed to his satisfaction, Vincent decided to celebrate with a drink at the 3 Broomsticks. He found Hagrid sitting alone in a corner, nursing a glass of mead. Hagrid looked up when Vincent called and waved him over. "Professor Vincent, come sit. Want a drink?" Vincent sat and ordered a mead. "Do you come here often, Hagrid?" Hagrid wore a contented expression. "I do. Hogwarts is terribly quiet on holiday, so I come here sometimes. And the drinks are good." They chatted casually, and soon the subject turned to Harry. "Harry's a good kid," Hagrid said, rubbing his eyes. "When we were in Diagon Alley yesterday, he even bought you a present." "He did?" Vincent was surprised. "What did he get me?" "Seems you haven't got it yet," Hagrid said with a grin. "Better keep it a surprise." While they talked, Hagrid nodded toward the other side of the room. That's our new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor this year. Vincent glanced across. A man with a thick turban wrapped around his head sat with his back to them. Quirrell, Vincent realized. He touched the Tree of Wisdom, a subtle, private link he kept, and it answered with two names at once. Quirinus Quirrell, wizard, and Tom Riddle, wizard. The implication was clear. Lord Voldemort, Vincent murmured under his breath. The name provoked no confusion in him, only a raw, simple hatred. Vincent hadn't been watching Quirrell closely. He and Hagrid had only glanced in his direction. Still, the anger in Vincent's eyes was hard to conceal. Family had always meant everything to him. He had been an orphan before he took the name Vincent, and when he became part of a family at last, he made protecting them his obligation. He had failed at that duty. His sister still lay in a coma. It was all Lord Voldemort's fault. The wizard who had used the Cruciatus curse on her had died quietly in Azkaban, but that changed nothing for Vincent. He could not forgive Voldemort for the wars, fear, and oppression he had spread. The world should be peaceful and beautiful. Voldemort had to be destroyed. Professor Vincent? Hagrid rapped the table in front of him, breaking Vincent out of his reverie. Sorry, Hagrid, Vincent said, forcing a smile as he turned his attention back. I was distracted. Where were we? This was not the moment to try and act against Voldemort. Even if he could get rid of the part of Voldemort clinging to Quirrell, it would be pointless. So long as Horcruxes existed, Voldemort could return. He had to uproot the problem completely. Quirinus Quirrell, the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts, Hagrid said after a pause, frowning as he thought. Professor McGonagall told me about him a few days ago. Said he was top of his class, proper Ravenclaw, solid theory and all. That sounds promising, Vincent said, taking a casual sip of mead while his thoughts still churned elsewhere. Hagrid shook his head slowly. Poor fellow. At Hogwarts, no one who teaches defense against the dark arts leaves unscathed. He looked regretful. Maybe Dumbledore could teach the subject himself. He'd know how to counter the curse. But he's far too busy, obviously. Vincent wondered why Quirrell had come to the leaky cauldron now, while Voldemort was literally in his head. If too many people noticed something odd, it could be dangerous. Maybe Quirrell was simply confident in his disguise. The turban that covered the back of his head gave off a strong garlic smell, and no one seemed willing to get close. Then Quirrell moved. Vincent and Hagrid fell silent and turned their attention to him. Quirrell, back to the room, rose slowly. Vincent felt his heart quicken, a cold unease crawling over him. Then, an overwhelming sensation of being watched surged up until it felt like someone was staring straight at him. He was looking at me. It was Lord Voldemort looking at me. Cold sweat broke out across Vincent's palms. Quirrell, however, kept walking without turning. He left the leaky cauldron with that same slow, silent gait. By the time Vincent blinked back to himself, the door had been shut by new customers. Hagrid, unaware of Vincent's disturbance, chattered on about dragons. Vincent tried to pay attention, but could not shake the certainty that Voldemort had singled him out. Why him, and not Hagrid, who'd been watching Quirrell too? Had Voldemort noticed the Tree of Wisdom observing him? If so, Voldemort was far more dangerous than Vincent had guessed. No one, Vincent believed not even Dumbledore, had realized the tree's abilities. He forced himself to hope he was mistaken. Quirrell did not return to the leaky cauldron. Hagrid talked mostly about dragons, while Vincent listened half-heartedly. When Vincent reached home that evening, it was already dark. A dark shape circled over his doorstep and settled on the mailbox. An owl, a snowy owl. No wild snowy owls lived in Britain, only the Arctic, so clearly a wizard's bird. It held a long, rectangular parcel in its beak. For me? Vincent asked as he took the packet. Thanks. Do you want an owl treat? After accepting the treat, the owl flew off, content. Vincent untied the wrapping. Inside was a rectangular box with careful packing and a small torn note, clearly ripped from a notebook, the back scrawled in a hurried hand. The handwriting was familiar. Harry, of course. He opened the box to find a delicate silver pocket watch, filigree worked into its face. Flipping the cover revealed an inscription inside, "To my most respected person." A thoughtful gift, Vincent murmured, smiling despite himself. He closed the watch and slipped it into his pocket. The day's bad mood eased. At noon the next day, Harry came over, carrying an old flower pot. He set the pot with the biting cabbage on the table and looked at Vincent anxiously. Teacher, is something wrong with it? I followed the method you wrote, and I added the potion when I watered it. But look, aren't the leaves supposed to be brighter? It looks a bit off. Vincent frowned at the plant. The leaves were limp and their color had dulled. It did not look healthy. That shouldn't happen, he said. Almost every plant he had treated with his special potion had shown marked improvement, faster growth, or unusual qualities. Eldra? He called to the tree of wisdom, asking it to analyze the biting cabbage. The tree replied with its familiar, quiet assessment. Type, biting cabbage, characteristic unknown. Status, growing 99% malnourished. 28, bite the kale variation. Malnourished? Vincent stared at the biting cabbage, puzzled. He had never seen this before. The leaves drooped slightly, but there was no sign of rot or wilting. He pinched a little soil from the pot between his fingers. It crumbled easily and was a dull gray, definitely not normal. Harry watched Vincent's silence and couldn't help asking, Teacher, is it sick? Vincent shook his head. Don't worry, Harry. It's not sick. It just needs nutrients. If the problem was malnutrition, feeding it should fix things. Vincent got up and went to the storage room while Harry stood guard over the plant. When Vincent returned, he carried a black sack that gave off a powerful, unpleasant odor. Harry instinctively covered his nose. What's that? He asked. Fertilizer, Vincent answered. The sack held dragon dung mix. As the name suggested, its main ingredient was dragon dung, Professor Sprout's secret formula, and Vincent had added a little of his own blood as well. The bag had been sitting in his warehouse for a long time. Fresh dragon mix was excellent for plants, but this one, aged in storage, smelled especially strong. Vincent gave a quick flick of his wand. A broom in the corner floated over, its handle shrinking as the bristles transformed into a small shovel. You fertilize it, Harry, Vincent said, setting the bag in front of him. Harry eyed the fertilizer warily, looked back at the biting cabbage, gritted his teeth, and took the shovel. Just a shallow hole, don't dig too deep, Vincent reminded him. Sprinkle a little, then cover it back up. Harry nodded and carefully scooped out a small pit beside the roots. When he opened the bag, the smell hit him again, and he stepped back a few paces. Oh dear, he muttered. Seeing Harry recoil, Vincent backed away too. Professor Sprout's recipe really did have issues. Maybe he should suggest adding some scent next time. Harry pouted and then brightened. Teacher, use the bubblehead charm? Vincent's eyes lit up. Good idea. He waved his wand, and transparent bubbles enveloped both their heads. They didn't cancel the smell completely, but it became bearable. Gritting his teeth, Harry dug out a little dragon dung mix with the shovel, sprinkled it into the pit, and covered the soil. Almost immediately, the biting cabbage stirred, its leaves trembling. It's working, teacher, Harry said, smiling. Vincent nodded. The plant had been starving, but something was odd. When Vincent brushed aside the soil and unearthed the recently buried fertilizer, it had already turned gray and dusty. The nutrients had been sucked dry, just like the earlier soil. Keep going, Vincent said after a moment. Give it more. Yes, teacher. Harry dug and fed another handful. This time, the plant reacted more violently. Its leaves shook hard, and the dragon dung mix went dull and shriveled almost instantly, as if every nutrient had been drained away. Harry's eyes widened. Is it starving? Before Vincent could answer, the biting cabbage opened its mouth wide, showing rows of sharp teeth. It made no other motion. Harry's memory flicked back to the day it had gulped down an entire pot of potion with that mouth. He decided to try feeding it directly. He scooped a shovelful of dragon dung mix, hesitated for a heartbeat, then shoved it into the biting cabbage's open mouth. The plant snapped its jaws shut and began to writhe and gurgle. After a moment, it opened again and spat out a clump of shriveled, grayish-black residue that landed on Harry's shoe. Uff! Harry recoiled. The expelled residue looked like ash. As Harry continued to feed it, the plant behaved like a bottomless pit. The dragon dung mix was nutrient-rich. Normal plants would be satisfied with only a little, but the biting cabbage absorbed everything at a frantic pace. 3 bags vanished as if into a hole, the nutrients seeming to disappear somewhere within the plant. Finally, after nearly a full 3 bags, something changed. The biting cabbage lifted itself a little, gave a small, satisfied burp, and went still. Vincent and Harry exchanged looks. Then an observation from Vincent's tree of life popped up. Species, biting cabbage. Trait, gigantism. Status, growing. Gigantism? Vincent murmured. He hadn't seen the plant actually grow larger. Harry, that's enough for now. Something about it has changed. Harry picked the awakened biting cabbage out of the pot and weighed it in his hands. It felt the same weight, same texture, no obvious change. He held it up to his face. Have you changed at all? Can you show me? The biting cabbage seemed to understand. It nodded in a surprisingly human way and jumped from Harry's hands to the floor. It closed its mouth, and a black light began to pulse from within its leaves. Before Vincent could react further, a surge of magic slammed into him, massive and instantaneous. He sensed a huge well of power coalescing inside the plant, far greater than anything he'd felt from it before. 29. Accident Harry, Vincent snapped, hurrying to his side and clapping a hand on his shoulder. Close your eyes. Why? Harry didn't get to finish. The world tilted, and with that characteristic tug, they apparated to the street in front of the shop. The shop stood in a quiet corner. The only other person nearby was a middle-aged man smoking with his back to them. The sudden appearance of two wizards didn't turn his head. Because the apparition had been short, Harry felt only a momentary rush of dizziness. Still shaken, he gripped Vincent's sleeve. "What's wrong, teacher?" Vincent didn't answer. He was staring hard at the shop. A muffled rumbling broke the silence. The shop front groaned. Harry jumped. The whole building shook as if it might collapse. Glass exploded in a shower of fragments, and the wooden door was ripped free, hurtling outward and striking the smoking man with a thunderous bang. The man flung his cigarette away and spun toward them, eyes wide. "What happened?" he shouted. Vincent forced a sheepish smile, drew his wand and flicked. The passerby's shout died in his throat. Vincent's charm was quick and harmless, only leaving the man dazed and a little woozy. He staggered, confused, and then, just as Vincent intended, his attention slid away from the scene. Inside, something huge was pushing at the walls. A deep, crackling creak came from the shop as wood and brick protested. Looking through the smashed window, Harry saw nothing but a mass of green. The little shop was propped up from within by the enormous body of the biting cabbage. Its leaves had ballooned to colossal size and had burst through the ceiling. The roof was gone, and cracks spidered across the remaining walls. "It's giant-sized," Vincent muttered, an amused, helpless twist to his mouth. Trouble, he thought. This place was not fit to live in anymore. He stepped closer and waved his wand in a wide, gentle arc to scatter dust and debris. As he reached the doorway, the plant's brief rage blunted as if someone had turned off a tap. The biting cabbage sagged, its massive bulk deflating like a punctured bladder. It made a low groan, then its leaves shrank and its roots curled in on themselves until, in less than a heartbeat, it was back to normal size. Harry followed close behind, blinking. Why did it stop?" "Magic drains," Vincent said, lifting the cabbage and handing it to Harry. "The giant sizing is temporary. It doesn't last long." Harry poked at the plant's mouth. The leaf trembled, but there was none of the earlier menace. The creature lay limp in his arms, as harmless as a sleepy pup. Vincent rubbed his temple. The giant burst had been alarming, but it had lasted no more than 3 seconds. "Now we need to figure out how to deal with this," Vincent said. Harry glanced at the wrecked shop and felt his stomach tighten. Fortunately, most of the damage was repairable. Vincent stepped forward and murmured, "Reparo." Under the sweep of his wand, the smashed glass stitched itself together, the roof righted, and the hurled door slid back into its frame. In little more than 10 seconds, the outside looked mostly normal again, though pots and potion bottles inside would need careful attention and a lot of tidying. Harry swallowed and looked down at the biting cabbage. "Did I cause all this?" Vincent gave him a soft, reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry, Harry. It's not your fault. No one could have predicted it would go berserk like that." At that moment, the shop door, one of Vincent's own reinforced doors, swung open. Lupin appeared and paused, staring at the scene. "What on earth happened? Was there an earthquake?" Vincent and Harry exchanged a look. "No," Vincent said, shaking his head. "No earthquake. You're just in time. Help me clean up inside." He pushed the door open wider and led the way, leaving Lupin blinking in confusion. For Vincent, a broken shop was a minor inconvenience. The real problem was publicity. Even in a quiet street, the commotion had been visible. As he had feared, a few muggles had seen or heard something. To be safe, Vincent moved through the area and cast Obliviate on each person he encountered. Despite his efforts, the incident did not remain unnoticed. The Ministry of Magic picked up a strong anomalous magic signature in the Muggle world and flagged it as an abnormal magic reaction. Because Vincent was the only known wizard in the district, investigators from the Accidental Magic Reversal Squad came calling that evening. Vincent tried to play dumb, but the investigator produced a photograph that silenced him. It showed the moment the structure had been burst open by something from within. The angle hid the plant itself, but the damage was unmistakable. There was no plausible deniability. "How did you get this picture?" Vincent asked, curiosity overcoming his unease. The investigator smiled, clearly pleased with a smooth investigation. "A bit of backtracking magic," he said, "not something an ordinary person can learn." 30. Convenience of identity. In the potted plant shop that evening, Vincent found himself being questioned. He cooperated readily with the Ministry of Magic investigator. If the biting cabbage wasn't seen by muggles, the ministry was unlikely to cause trouble. "Name?" the investigator asked. "Adrian Wisen." "Occupation?" "I teach at Hogwarts." "About what happened at your house?" "It was just an experimental accident." "Not some kind of magical creature?" "No." After a round of questions, the investigator filled a page of notes. Because Vincent was so cooperative, the interview went unusually smoothly. Then the man glanced up and asked, almost out of curiosity, "Are you really a professor at Hogwarts?" Vincent nodded. "Yes." The investigator blinked. "This is the first time I've seen such a young professor." "I only started this year," Vincent said with a relaxed smile. "A newly hired professor?" the investigator murmured, flipping through his notes. He added one last line, stood, and said, "The investigation is concluded, Mr. Vincent." Vincent was surprised. "That's it? Do I need to do anything else?" The investigator gave a little shrug. "You're suspected of possibly keeping dangerous creatures, but we didn't find any prohibited beasts here," and he gave a conspiratorial wink. "We believe you. After all, you're a Hogwarts professor." Vincent inwardly took note. Being a Hogwarts professor carried weight in the wizarding world. When the man pulled on his windproof hat and headed for the door, he added, "If you like, you can come to the ministry tomorrow to give a statement. It's not necessary, though." He left in haste. If the matter could be closed so simply, Vincent had no intention of marching into the ministry. That would be like walking into a tiger's den. He'd broken the law in several ways. Secretly raising a dragon alone could land him in Azkaban. Besides, he believed that even if the ministry suspected him, they lacked hard evidence. After seeing the investigator out, Vincent checked his pocket watch. 6 o'clock. The man had been in a hurry, probably to leave work. Harry had left the biting cabbage with Vincent before he went off. He was worried it might grow unexpectedly. If Harry's aunt's house had burst open, it would have been a nightmare to fix. Vincent wasn't the sort of person who could wave a wand and patch a house instantly. Vincent looked at the cabbage. It had regained some energy and no longer looked listless after its giant transformation. When he approached, it opened its mouth, asking, as always, for fertilizer made with dragon dung. Vincent had almost used up his supply. "I didn't prepare much dragon dung fertilizer," he said, taking out ordinary magical plant food from the storeroom. "This will have to do for now." The cabbage sniffed at it, then coughed and spat the fertilizer back out with obvious disgust. "You're getting picky," Vincent scolded, his face darkening. "If you keep that up, I won't feed you at all." At his tone, the cabbage immediately stopped coughing and accepted the food. It still knew who was in charge. After drawing nutrients from the fertilizer, the plant returned to its usual size. "Can you control your size at will?" Vincent asked. The cabbage bobbed up and down, a clear yes. A faint black light shimmered over it, and it began to expand. This time it was clearly able to manage the growth. Perhaps before it had lacked practice with the ability. "Stop," Vincent ordered, when it reached about 1/2 meter tall. That size would frighten most people. To test its bite strength, he produced a piece of refined iron he'd bought on the black market. Goblin worked, very tough, and set it in front of the cabbage. The cabbage stared at the iron as if incredulous. Under Vincent's urging, it finally bit down, leaving a tooth mark but losing one of its teeth in the process. Immediately afterward, it seemed drained of magic and shrank back to normal, whining about its lost tooth. Vincent quieted it with a small bottle of a specially made growth potion. Picking up the lost tooth, Vincent took it to the Tree of Wisdom for analysis. The result came back: type biting cabbage tooth. Characteristic: giant transformation. The tooth carried the giant transformation trait. With it, Vincent could brew a targeted growth potion to transfer that characteristic to other plants, but only with a chance of success. Only species compatible with the trait would take it, and compatibility would have to be worked out through repeated experiments. Fortunately, the cabbage's teeth were regenerative. He could harvest more as needed without worrying about supply. It might require a minor sacrifice from the cabbage each time, but Vincent suspected the biting cabbage wouldn't begrudge the trade-off. The start date for Hogwarts was September 1st, which meant Harry still had nearly a month left of summer. Vincent had, naturally, set up a few study tasks for him. He didn't want Harry to squander the whole vacation, though he also knew children needed time to play. The only problem was Harry didn't seem to have any friends. At least, Vincent had never seen any. On the first Sunday of August, Harry helped Vincent process the day's harvest as usual, preparing essence of murtlap. Harry worked carefully, pouring the finished potion into glass bottles. After a moment, he looked up at Vincent and asked, a little nervously, "Teacher, when can you start teaching me spells?" Vincent had his head bent over the bottles, inspecting the clarity and color of the potion. He paused, met Harry's eyes, and said, "I remember saying you could only start once you'd had your 11th birthday." He stopped mid-sentence. He just realized Harry had already turned 11. "Time flies," he muttered. Harry watched him closely, fingers tightening on the bottle, as if afraid Vincent would say no. "Of course," Vincent said, setting the potion down. "Since you're 11, you can formally learn magic. The rules say you shouldn't cast spells until you're at Hogwarts, though, and there are only a few days left before term." Harry's face brightened at the confirmation. "I can't wait, teacher," Vincent smiled. He'd noticed the wand Harry had brought with him when he arrived. He'd meant to use it. "Hagrid took you to Diagon Alley for books, didn't he?" Vincent asked, putting his hands on his knees. Harry nodded. "Then you must have had a look at your copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, Vincent continued, as if it were obvious. "I can't quite remember the exact title." "No." Harry's answer came sheepishly. The book was still under his bed. After they'd come back from Diagon Alley, he'd been too busy waving his wand and teasing Hedwig to remember the textbooks. "I didn't look at it." Vincent was quiet for a moment. He'd been an earnest student as a boy. He remembered poring over his summer reading until the spines wore thin. Harry didn't seem the studious type, but that didn't mean he couldn't learn. "Should I send you to get it?" he asked. "No need." Vincent waved a hand and rose. "I still have my old copies." His storeroom, extended by an undetectable extension charm and cluttered by years of neglect, was a mess. Things were hard to find, but he eventually dug out a battered cardboard box. A few minutes later he reappeared, his robes dusted with flowery powder, holding a worn copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. Harry took it and sneezed as dander burst into the air. "Cough, cough, thank you." He opened the book. The pages were yellowing but legible, and nearly every page was covered in careful notes, evidence of a serious student. On the inside cover, in a different, more hurried hand, a note caught his eye. "Mum told me to remind you, don't forget to eat lunch, brother. Cecilia." The ink had faded, a remnant of many years ago. Cecilia, a name Harry hadn't heard before. Perhaps Vincent had a sister. Vincent had never mentioned her. The thought only flickered through his mind. Impatience to begin pushed it aside. "So, where do we start, teacher?" Harry set the book down and picked up his wand. Vincent laughed softly at the eager face. He tapped the book with a finger. "These spells are chosen for first years. Pick something that interests you and try it." Harry thumbed through the pages, indecisive. "How about the wand lighting charm?" he asked at last. "Good choice." Vincent raised his wand. Lumos. A small, steady globe of light sparked at the tip of Vincent's wand, bathing the table in a warm glow. "Your turn, Harry," he said, and lowered his wand again. "Concentrate. Look at the page. There are warnings in the book." The wand lighting charm was simple in theory, but demanded focus. Lose concentration, and you might scorch your wand or make the light flare unpredictably. Miranda Goshawk, author of the spellbook, had warned, in her usual blunt way, that if you doubted your ability, you should buy a magical lantern. Vincent brewed potions with one hand and coached Harry with the other. Raise your arm a bit higher. Wave the wand faster. Don't forget the incantation. Say it properly. After half an hour of practice, with his jaw set and his body tense, Harry finally felt the fumbled pieces click into place. A pinprick of light blossomed at the tip of his wand, soft and steady. His eyes widened, and a grin split his face. For a fleeting moment, he could hardly breathe from excitement. "I did it!" he cried. Vincent leaned back in his chair and allowed a pleased smile. He'd felt the same fierce joy the first time he'd made a wand glow. "This is only the beginning," he said, clapping his hands once, "but you did very well." Harry tightened his grip on his wand, thirsting for more. "Teacher, what do we learn next?" Vincent's smile took on a mysterious curve. Under Harry's eager gaze, he answered simply, "Potions." Harry's smile froze. 32. Go to the station. August was coming to an end. Besides studying potions with Vincent, Harry had been attending charms lessons. At someone's strong insistence, his potions time had been cut back and his charms time increased. With Vincent's and Lupin's help, after a month, Harry had almost finished reviewing the first-year spells he needed. His talent in potions was mediocre, but in charms, he wasn't slow at all. He was, in fact, quite skilled. Vincent believed that if Harry applied himself to charms, becoming very good at it in the future would be no problem. Of course, the prerequisite was that Harry actually study seriously. Knowing Harry, Vincent suspected study seriously was only partly likely, but he still thought Harry had potential. It was the last day of August. Tomorrow, Harry would be returning to Hogwarts. He was excited, but also reluctant. Hogwarts was a boarding school, which meant he wouldn't be able to come to Vincent's during term time. He had packed all his things. The only problem was he knew Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon would never willingly take him to King's Cross. The thought of asking them made him uneasy. He didn't have to worry, though. He trusted Vincent would help. After the usual charms practice, Harry asked nervously, "Professor, could you take me to King's Cross tomorrow? Aunt and Uncle definitely won't." Vincent had expected the question. He waved a hand. "Of course, I was planning on it." He reached into his pocket and produced a document. Harry peered closer and saw a driver's license with Vincent's photograph. "I've even got a muggle car," Vincent added with a smile. "Relax, Harry. I'll pick you up around 9. Relieved, Harry nodded vigorously. When his steps turned lighter, Lupin emerged from the greenhouse door. "Has Harry gone already?" he asked. Vincent nodded, then remembered something. "Lupin, I'm taking Harry to King's Cross tomorrow." Lupin glanced at the calendar on the table and realized today was the last day of August. "You're coming too?" Vincent nodded. "Of course," Vincent said. "Otherwise, who's going to drive the car back?" They would be traveling to the station together, but someone had to bring the muggle car home. Lupin looked puzzled. "Wait, what about you? Aren't you coming back with me?" At that, Vincent realized he hadn't told Lupin yet. He smiled slightly. "Actually, starting tomorrow, I'll be teaching care of magical creatures at Hogwarts." Lupin almost leapt up. "When did this happen? Why am I only finding out now? What about the greenhouse?" Vincent shrugged as if it were no big deal. "Professor Kettleburn retired this summer and suggested I take over. As for the greenhouse, don't worry, you won't be out of a job. It still needs looking after. I'm not planning to close it." Lupin sank back onto the sofa with a complicated expression. "That's surprising, Vincent. Being a Hogwarts professor isn't easy." "Thanks to Kettleburn for the opportunity," Vincent said, "and teaching is a pleasant thing." "Congratulations," Lupin said sincerely. Vincent's appointment was good news. He'd been a capable teacher while working there, and Harry would have someone reliable looking out for him at school. Vincent pulled the car keys from his pocket and tossed them to Lupin. "You might want to practice how to use Muggle transport," he said, nodding to the keys. "It'd be terrible if you hit someone." "Yes, boss," Lupin replied, taking the keys. He was curious about cars anyway. Early the next morning, Vincent and Lupin drove up to number 4, Privet Drive, and parked. "Is this where Harry lives?" Lupin craned his neck out the window to look. "This family's not easy to deal with," Vincent said as he stepped out. "I'll be right back." He rang the bell. Footsteps approached, and Vernon Dursley opened the door. Harry stood in the hallway behind him, carrying a stack of parcels. Vincent straightened his hat and bowed politely. "Good morning. I'm a professor from Hogwarts. I'm here to take Harry. I thought he mentioned." Vernon's impatient face darkened when he heard Hogwarts. The corner of his mouth twitched in disgust. "Oh, it's you lot again," he snorted, scowling. He restrained himself from further outburst, though the memory of the pig's tail that had appeared on his precious son last time was still plain enough. Vernon leaned toward Vincent and sneered. "Take this filthy fellow away and send him back to your freak school. I don't want to see any of you. Abnormal people." Harry, used to such treatment, nodded and said nothing. Vincent simply smiled at him and ignored Vernon's rudeness. He picked up Harry's luggage with easy assurance. "All right, Harry, let's go." They stowed their luggage in the trunk. Vincent opened the back door for Harry and settled into the passenger seat while Mr. Lupin took the wheel, peering at it and muttering, "So, how do you start this thing?" Vincent, watching him fumble, kindly reminded, "Don't forget to turn the key." Startled, Mr. Lupin did as instructed. The engine purred, the car shuddered, and it started. "Oh, well, that's simpler than I thought," he said, satisfied, gripping the wheel with both hands as if ready to go. Harry watched him curiously. "Mr. Lupin, have you driven a car before?" "Of course," Mr. Lupin replied, patting his chest. "I tried it just yesterday." Harry stared. He glanced at Vincent as if seeking reassurance about letting Mr. Lupin drive. Vincent smiled and spread his hands. "Don't worry, Harry. I've been watching the whole time. He hasn't driven the car into the river yet." "That's really reassuring," Harry muttered, fastening his seatbelt and checking it twice. They did manage to clip a few trash cans and a squirrel that darted into the road, and the little car lost a headlight, but Mr. Lupin reacted quickly enough that they arrived at King's Cross Station in one piece. The station was packed. Mr. Lupin left first. He had a batch of herbs on the plantation that was about to ripen and needed to be harvested at once. Vincent cast a levitation charm on the luggage trolley, taking some of the weight off. Harry only had to give it a gentle pull. "Where do we go?" Harry asked, looking at the stream of people. "Between platforms 9 and 10, Vincent said. It had been a long time since Vincent had been back. King's Cross looked much the same as it had a decade ago, the layout unchanged, only the bricks a little darker and marked with new water stains, the signs a touch faded. Vincent led Harry to the pillar between platforms 9 and 10. A family was already gathered there. Red hair gave them away at once as the Weasleys. Vincent hung back and watched Mr. and Mrs. Weasley bustling to send their children through. "All right, Fred. George, you must listen to your older brother," Molly Weasley scolded gently while straightening Ginny's collar and casting an eye at the twins. Fred and George looked up at the sky in perfect unison. Arthur Weasley, at the back of the group, spotted Vincent and Harry. "Children, hurry up. There are people behind us," he called to the lingering twins, then offered Vincent an apologetic look. Vincent waved him off and, checking his silver pocket watch, said, "It's all right. Take your time, sir. We still have plenty of time before the train leaves." Mr. Weasley breathed easier and chuckled when Vincent remarked, "It must be hard having so many children." "Not at all," Mr. Weasley said, surprised, as the twins finally pushed through into the barrier. He peered at Harry. "Ah, are you here to send your child to school?" He looked between Vincent and Harry. "Is he a new student?" "Yes," Vincent answered. "This is his first day." Harry, standing a little awkwardly beside Vincent, nodded. Mr. Weasley smiled, curious. "Oh, then you must be this child's father." He squinted, taking in the two of them, then touched his slightly thinning hair. Harry flushed. Vincent laughed easily and explained, "Actually, I'm a friend, not his father." Mr. Rember Weasley seemed to think better of pressing the issue. After Mrs. Weasley sent Ron through, she waved and called, "Dear, we should go." "Coming," Arthur said. He nodded to Vincent and Harry. "Well then, good luck to you both." Once the Weasleys had gone through, Vincent tugged Harry's sleeve. The crowds around them blurred as if unwilling to notice. "Come on," he urged. "Let's go in too." Harry took a deep breath, pushed the trolley, and followed. Even though he knew it was impossible to collide with anything, he closed his eyes the moment the luggage brushed the wall. When he opened them, He was on a different platform altogether. A scarlet steam engine sat hissing at the tracks. Children his age crowded aboard the carriages, their voices a happy clatter. A sign read Platform 9 3/4. Many of the students were wearing wizarding robes like Vincent's, which made Harry feel less alone. Vincent, seeing him still a little stunned, patted his shoulder. "All right, Harry, time to get on the train. Go early and you can pick a good seat." Harry roused himself and looked from the train to Vincent. He hesitated, then scratched his head. "Thank you, teacher. See you at Christmas. I'll write." He knew from the Hogwarts timetable that he wouldn't go home again until the Christmas holiday in December. Vincent's mouth curved. "See you then, Harry." Vincent wondered what Harry's face would look like when they met again at the opening feast. He found himself quietly looking forward to it. After Harry boarded the train, he ran into the Weasley twins again. He was surprised when they called out his name, Harry Potter, and even more surprised by how interested they were in the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. A month earlier, Professor Vincent had warned him about this, told him the story of how he had apparently defeated Lord Voldemort as a baby, and warned, with a half-joke, that if anyone recognized him, he shouldn't be surprised. He was a celebrity. Harry had laughed it off then. Now he was beginning to understand. He found he didn't like the attention at all. The title Savior made him uncomfortable. As Vincent had put it, the more attention you get, the more trouble you attract. After Harry had taken his seat in a compartment, Vincent himself got on the train and went straight to the front. Just before the prefect's carriage, there was an extra compartment that served as the staff lounge, where the driver of the Hogwarts Express and the trolley witch stayed when the train stopped. Vincent had ridden the express for years without ever seeing the driver. Today, when he pushed the door open, there was only a plump witch inside fiddling with her cart. It was the trolley witch, the same one he'd seen as a student. Everyone said she'd been selling sweets on the Hogwarts Express since it first started running. Her cart was piled with all sorts of treats. Vincent noticed one box that kept twitching in the pile, no doubt a chocolate frog. He rather liked chocolate, except for cockroach clusters. When the witch looked up and saw him, she started, then peered at him suspiciously. "Are you a parent?" "Parents aren't allowed on the train," she said. "No," Vincent replied. "I'm a professor." Recognition cleared her face. She examined him carefully from top to bottom, and then, as if remembering, brightened. "Adrian Wisen, isn't it? I used to know every student's face. Ah, that's what getting old's like. Can't remember as well as you used to." She laughed. "You used to buy a lot of things from me. Big customers stick in my mind, sharing sweets with your Hufflepuff juniors. Never expected you to become a professor." Vincent smiled. "May I use the lounge?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, if you'll buy something from me." "All right." Vincent picked a chocolate frog from the top of the cart. A shrill whistle blew outside, and the train began to pull away. The trolley witch hurried to push her cart toward the corridor. "Have a comfortable journey, Professor Vincent," she called, and shuffled off. Left alone, Vincent sank onto a seat, unwrapped the chocolate frog, and opened the little frame at the bottom of the box. Every frog came with a collectible card. Unsurprisingly, he found Albus Dumbledore's portrait winking back at him. Oddly, he always seemed to get Dumbledore. He tucked the card into his pocket, stared out at the countryside sliding past, and before long, the motion of the train and the quiet were enough to send him to sleep. Further back on the train, in one of the compartments, the 3 first-years had gathered. Ron was trying to show Harry and Hermione that he could do a trick. Harry wondered what Ron might do, perhaps a levitation charm, Lumos, or Reparo. Those were the obvious ones learned in class. Instead, Ron began to chant in a sing-song voice, "Daisy, sweet butter, and sunshine, turn this stupid fat rat yellow." Harry blinked. He'd never heard a spell like that. The words sounded more like a rhyme or a nursery jingle than proper magic, and the opening, "Daisy, sweet butter, and sunshine," reminded him oddly of a shop name he'd seen advertised. Whatever it was, the charm failed. Nothing happened to the rat in Ron's lap. Hermione, for her part, announced she had practiced a few spells at home and that they all worked. That made Harry think. Maybe most first-years couldn't perform magic yet without concentrating. If so, perhaps he was doing quite well. He had spent the summer going through the standard book of spells, grade 1, so he'd at least previewed all the first-year spells, though, as Vincent liked to remind him, your spells are just for show, Harry. Don't get complacent. Hermione also gave him some unwelcome news. Your name's in a lot of books, she said. History of magic, the rise and fall of the dark arts, important magical events of the 20th century. The idea of seeing his name written down in history books made Harry feel oddly strange. People in history books were rarely still alive to read about themselves. When Hermione left the compartment, Ron scowled. I don't want to be in the same house as her, no matter what house I'm sorted into, he muttered. Harry had to admit he felt uncomfortable around Hermione Granger. She was clever and capable, unfailingly prepared, but she spoke with a confidence that came across as a little arrogant. I've memorized all the textbooks, she had said, and it fitted Harry's image of a know-it-all. He had learned a lot over the summer, too, but he hadn't felt the need to announce it. 35. Entering the castle. When the train pulled into the station, it was nearly dark. Hagrid's booming voice carried across the platform. First years! First years! Over here! Harry, over here! How are you? Vincent woke at the sound of the chatter. He pushed open the compartment window and saw the students already gathered below, with Hagrid fussing in front of them. He rubbed his stiff shoulders, stretched, and stepped down from his seat. Riding the Hogwarts Express again after so long had been pleasant. Only when the students had gone on ahead did he slowly climb down from the train. A sharp whistle escaped him, and the sound hung in the night. From above came another whistle in reply, and a shape descended without a sound, landing lightly before him. It was a thestral, skeletal and tall, its wings half-folded, pale eyes with no visible pupils oddly bright in the gloom. Thanks for coming, Vincent said, running a hand along its neck. The thestral lowered its head and sniffed his palm as if checking his scent, then snorted softly in what looked like approval. He swung up onto its back. The thestral unfurled its vast membrane, flexed its wings, and leapt into the air. Cold night wind lashed his face. His black robe flapped like a shadow against the sky. Riding a thestral was not nearly as comfortable as sitting in one of the carriages. Thin ribs and exposed bone made his seat unkind to his backside. No wonder Hogwarts used them to pull carriages instead. They landed at the castle gate. Vincent dismounted and sneezed. The high flight left him chilled. He arrived ahead of the other professors. The first years were no doubt still crossing the lake in their boats, and older students were taking to the thestral-drawn carriages. He pushed open the gate and found Professor McGonagall waiting on the other side, dressed in a dark green robe, hair pinned neat and expression grave, ready to receive the new students. McGonagall's face froze when she saw him. She had been expecting a noisy group of new faces, not him. Professor Vincent? She asked, surprised. Where are the students? They're behind, Vincent said with a shrug. I came on the express too. I don't suppose I missed the start of term feast, did I? A flicker of helplessness passed across McGonagall's face before she smoothed it away. Formality mattered now. Professor Vincent, she said briskly, voice edged with urgency, hurry inside. The other professors are already seated. Do you need me to help welcome them? He asked, lingering. She took in his wind-tossed hair, an unruly shock, and a tiny smile betrayed itself before she controlled it. No, thank you. That's all right. Inside the great hall, as McGonagall had said, the staff were already assembled. Even Professor Quirrell was present. Vincent was the last to arrive. Professor Sprout's eyes lit up when she spotted him, and she waved him over. Professor Vincent, come sit. He stepped lightly down the row and took the last seat beside Sprout. The other professors watched him as he passed, some with curiosity, some with barely concealed impatience. Severus Snape, in particular, looked displeased. Vincent knew why. Sometime in his 5th year, Snape had begun to dislike him. Vincent felt no great affection for the man who had once been allied with Voldemort, even if he appeared now to be back at Dumbledore's side. This was hardly the evening to make trouble, though, so he met Snape's glare and said nothing. Professor Sprout leaned toward him, eyes warm. I never thought Kettleburn would find anyone to take over, she murmured in disbelief. But it is you, Vincent. I heard rumors. I didn't expect it to be true. I didn't expect it either, he admitted. But the headmaster trusts me. I enjoy teaching, and I know a fair bit about care of magical creatures. You might be better suited for herbology, Sprout teased, smiling. That would put you out of a job, he replied with a light laugh. I couldn't let that happen. Snape snorted softly at that, the only sound of disapproval in the row. Vincent shot him a narrow look. Snape turned his head and ignored him. At that moment, Professor Dumbledore clapped his hands and his kindly smile spread across the hall. Quiet, please, he said. Our new students are about to arrive. This is an important moment. Let us keep it dignified. He paused, then fixed Vincent with one of those twinkling glances. I believe our new Care of Magical Creatures professor has an interesting sense of style. Vincent, finally noticing the state of his hair, ran his hands through it. Professor Flitwick, perched beside him, muttered in a tiny voice, I thought that was the latest craze. 36, Branch. As Harry fell into line and followed the others into the Great Hall, he was almost speechless with surprise. It wasn't the grandeur of Hogwarts that stopped him, nor the thousands of candles floating above and the ceiling that mimicked a starry night. It was Vincent, sitting at the staff table with a smile on his face. For a moment, Harry rubbed his eyes in disbelief. What on earth was going on? Vincent noticed Harry frozen in the aisle, and a faint flicker of satisfaction crossed his face, exactly the reaction he'd been waiting for. He chuckled softly and raised a finger to his lips, shushing Harry. Harry's eyes widened, clearly confused. What's wrong with you? Ron, who had been behind him, nudged his shoulder. Hurry up and get to the front. Only then did Harry realize he was slightly behind the boy with light brown hair ahead of him, and he hurried to catch up. He wanted badly to stride up to Vincent and demand an explanation, but this wasn't the time. He kept moving with the line. Led by Professor McGonagall, they took their places, standing in a row facing the other students. Vincent looked down at the sea of faces and then across at the professors. Most of the attention in the hall landed squarely on Harry Potter. It was inevitable. Who wouldn't want to see the boy who had defeated the Dark Lord? Now was their chance. Harry felt every stare and cast a pleading look at Vincent. The teacher only gave him a reassuring smile. Harry couldn't tell anyone not to look. The best he could do was take comfort from that small gesture. McGonagall brought forward a small, four-legged stool and set the battered sorting hat on it. At sight of it, Vincent got a sudden idea and asked the Tree of Wisdom to analyze the hat. The tree replied in its brief, odd way. Name, sorting hat. Introduction, alchemical product. Vincent felt a twinge of disappointment. With the tree's current capabilities, it could only identify the hat as an alchemical item, no details about its material or construction. Then, as if sensing something, the sorting hat twitched and looked about. I feel like someone is watching me, it said. Everyone is watching you, sorting hat. McGonagall reminded it with a fond smile. Indeed, the hat said, puckering its brim. But there are more important things. I've been waiting for this day for a very long time. Then, as it always did, the hat began to sing. The tune was familiar to Vincent, but the lyrics were different, a new verse for another year. The sorting hat had composed over 1,000 songs in the school's long history. The task wore on it, but the result was always the same, a jaunty, confident tune and a bow to the 4 house tables when it finished. The hall applauded. McGonagall stepped forward with a parchment, the list of new students for the year. When I call your name, you will come forward, place the hat on your head, sit on the stool, and await your sorting. Hannah Abbott, a rosy-cheeked girl with golden braids, padded up and put the hat on. Harry realized then what the sorting ceremony actually involved. He hadn't known the finer details, and for a moment had imagined some sort of exam or trial. No wonder he'd been cramming so many spells before school. Hufflepuff, the hat declared for Hannah, and Vincent, a Hufflepuff alumnus himself, was the first to applaud. More names followed, Susan Bones, Terry Boot, and the hat sent each student to their house. Vincent clapped for each one, a little louder whenever the hat called Hufflepuff. Harry Potter! When McGonagall said his name, the whole hall seemed to lean in. Whispers spread, all eyes were on him. Harry's heart thudded, and he glanced toward Vincent. The teacher's mouth formed a single word, Hufflepuff, and Vincent gave him a small, encouraging nod. Hufflepuff? Harry registered the temptation, Vincent's house, his teacher's house. But there were other considerations. As long as it wasn't Slytherin, Harry thought, he could accept most outcomes. He climbed onto the stool, took a breath, and let the old hat settle over his scarred forehead. Said the Sorting Hat in his mind. Difficult, very difficult. Courage, kindness, talent, you lack none of these. So where do we put you? Do you want Hufflepuff? The hat murmured aloud. A good choice. Of course, Slytherin would suit you as well. At the word Slytherin, Harry's pulse jolted. He repeated silently, with as much force as he could muster, not Slytherin. Oh, very well, the hat replied in a tone surprisingly respectful. I'll honor the young wizard's choice. Gryffindor! Relief washed over Harry when the hat announced Gryffindor. He had almost panicked at the thought of Slytherin. Vincent, watching from the staff table, felt a twinge of disappointment. He had hoped to nudge Harry into Hufflepuff, but he could see why the hat chose Gryffindor. It suited Harry. As Harry crossed to the Gryffindor table, the students there erupted in cheers. He ignored most of it, focusing instead on Vincent. When he met his teacher's relieved smile, Harry finally allowed himself to relax. Why does Harry Potter keep looking at you? As the last student was sorted, the sorting ceremony came to an end. Dumbledore rose, turned to face the students, and raised his hands for silence. Welcome to Hogwarts, he said with a smile, adjusting his half-moon spectacles. Before we enjoy our delicious feast, I have a few announcements. The Great Hall quieted slowly, everyone watching him. This year there will be a slight change in our staff, Dumbledore said, his gaze sweeping the teacher's table before pausing on Quirrell. Professor Quirinus Quirrell will be our new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Quirrell stood, gave a small nod to the hall, and sat again, his large purple turban drawing attention. Harry recognized him as the man he'd seen earlier at the Leaky Cauldron. I hope Professor Quirrell isn't too unlucky, a Gryffindor beside Harry murmured. But Harry wasn't thinking about Quirrell now. His attention had been snagged by someone else farther down the staff table. Sure enough, Dumbledore's next words confirmed his guess. And Professor Kettleburn, who has taught care of magical creatures, is officially retiring this term. He will be replaced by Professor Adrian Wisen. Harry found it hard to believe, even after Dumbledore said it aloud. Ron bumped his elbow. What are you grinning at? Be glad you're in Gryffindor, of course. Vincent rose as his name was announced and gave the students a casual wave. To his surprise, a ripple of chatter ran along the Hufflepuff table. Professor Adrian Wisen? That's him, right? It is. I've seen his picture. He looks the same. Same name, too. A round of applause and cheering came mainly from the younger Hufflepuffs. Vincent blinked, a little taken aback, and found himself watching his reflection in the highly polished table. His hair was neat, hardly the sort of look that would inspire such fuss. Beside him, Professor Sprout chuckled softly. You're as popular as you were when you were a student, Professor Wisen. Some of the older pupils still remember you, and a few of the younger ones have heard your name. That explanation only deepened Vincent's confusion. Popular when he was a student? He had always thought of himself as a background sort of person. Besides, 6 years had passed. Most of those who knew him as a student should have graduated. It made no sense. After the new professors were introduced, Dumbledore raised his hands again. Before the feast begins, I would like to say a few more words, and that is, nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak, thank you. With that, the tables filled as the feast began. Piled platters appeared and sent scents across the hall. A bewildering variety of dishes materialized before Vincent. Boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, fried potatoes, crisps, mashed potatoes. The fork in his hand froze. He liked potatoes well enough, but even he had limits. Fortunately, Sprout swapped her plate of roast beef with his potatoes, saving him from a carb coma. As they began to eat, Professor Flitwick, sitting next to Vincent, had the look of someone who had noticed something odd. He glanced toward the Gryffindor table, then back at Vincent. Why is Harry Potter staring at you, Professor Vincent? He asked in a puzzled voice. Does he know you? I was wondering the same thing, Sprout said, turning her head. Harry Potter has been looking over here. Vincent didn't see any reason to keep it secret. I live near his Muggle home, he said with a shrug. I run a little shop there. I put a Muggle-repelling charm on it, and when he walked in, I knew he was a wizard. I didn't realize at first that he was the famous Harry Potter, though. Flitwick and Sprout lit up with sudden understanding. Even Dumbledore leaned forward, interested. "You didn't tell me this, Professor Vinson," Dumbledore said with an amused twinkle. Vinson straightened. He had assumed Dumbledore already knew of Harry's visits. Harry was, after all, unusually important in Dumbledore's eyes. He felt it would be natural for Dumbledore to keep an eye on him. Then he thought of the way Harry had been treated by the Dursleys and realized Dumbledore might not have been aware of every small detail. "Harry and I have a bit of a connection," he said. "It's a long story, but essentially I just happen to live nearby." Dumbledore's blue eyes narrowed slightly behind his spectacles, as if weighing that remark. He tapped his fingers on the table and regarded Vincent thoughtfully. The attention made Vincent a touch uneasy. It wasn't just Dumbledore's scrutiny. Since Flitwick had said Harry's name, Snape's sharp gaze had been fixed on him too. If anyone took particular notice of Harry Potter's name, it was Professor Snape. Vincent decided not to dwell on it. He didn't enjoy gloomy thoughts, and while he felt some sympathy for Snape, he wasn't fond of the man. Better not to meet that stare. If he looked back, it felt like conceding something, so he kept his eyes away. "By the way," Sprout said with genuine curiosity, "what is Harry Potter like as a child?" Even the professors, it seemed, were fascinated by the legendary boy who lived. 38. Banquet. "Ah," Vincent said, a smile playing on his lips, pride in his tone as he went on. "Harry's a good boy. I taught him a few simple spells before term started, and he remembered every one of them, and, my word, the first time he cast the wand lighting charm." Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout exchanged a look as they listened to Vincent talk about Harry as if he were his own child. Maybe Vincent and Harry were closer than they seemed. Snape's displeasure at Vincent was written plainly on his face. Down at the tables, the students had finished their main courses. The plates in front of Harry had become desserts. The Gryffindors around him chatted about their families. Seamus mentioned his father was a Muggle, Neville that he'd been raised by his grandmother, Hermione that her father was a dentist. No one asked Harry about his family. Everyone knew what had happened to his parents. Bringing it up would only make things worse. Harry glanced at Vincent at the staff table, then at Percy Weasley opposite him. "Prefect Weasley," he began shyly, "what is Care of Magical Creatures about?" Percy immediately put down his syrup-covered pancake, sat up very straight, and looked proud. "Just call me Percy, Harry." "All right, Percy," Harry corrected himself. Perkin's smile deepened. "Any particular question?" "As I said, what is Care of Magical Creatures?" Percy cleared his throat and adopted an almost official tone. "Care of Magical Creatures is an elective only available to third years and above. You learn the habits of creatures, how to feed them, and the proper ways to interact with them." "Only third years?" Harry frowned. "So I can't take it this year?" "That's right," Percy nodded. "They figure it's too dangerous for younger students. Some creatures are hazardous, and the younger ones probably can't even hold a wand properly." Hermione added, "There weren't any textbooks on magical creatures on the book list we got before term. Are you interested in them, Harry?" "Probably," Harry said, glancing again toward Vincent. Percy followed his gaze to the staff table and mused. "This year is odd. 2 new professors at once. Defense against the dark arts was expected, but Care of Magical Creatures, Professor Kettleburn was supposed to teach that for at least a couple more years." As Harry looked at Professor Quirrell, a sudden sharp pain stabbed at his forehead, and he instinctively pressed his fingers to his skin. "You all right?" Percy asked. "Fine," Harry lied. He took a breath, fumbled in his robe for a small pouch, and drew out a tiny bottle of pale blue potion. He uncorked it and downed it in one swallow. "What's that?" Percy asked, curious. "Headache medicine," Harry said, slipping the bottle back into the pouch as casually as he could. "I get headaches sometimes." Percy accepted the explanation. He assumed Harry was taking Muggle medicine. In fact, the pouch Vincent had given Harry before term, charmed with an undetectable extension charm, contained a surprising assortment of potions, sedatives, blood-restoring draughts, burn paste, essence of murtlap, even a bottle of beauty potion. Harry had no idea why Vincent had prepared such a kit. Perhaps for impressing other students, he thought with a brief, embarrassed frown. But the blue draught had been a sedative, and the headache eased almost immediately. He tried looking at Quirrell again. The pain did not return. Maybe I was just nervous, he thought. When the feast ended, Dumbledore stood and announced a few term precautions. He listed familiar rules. The Forbidden Forest was out of bounds, no spells in the corridors, but then added, with an odd twinkle, those who do not wish to suffer a painful death should not enter the corridor on the right side of the fourth floor. Harry thought that sounded less like a warning and more like an invitation to the adventurous. It seemed almost designed to intrigue rather than deter. The final part of the banquet was the school song, and Harry never liked it. Everyone sang it to a different tune. Seeing Vincent mouthing the words with a look of comic despair, however, made him smile. When the singing was over, Harry meant to go say hello to Vincent, but there was no chance. Under Percy's direction, all the Gryffindor first years were to line up. "Everyone, follow me," Percy announced. "I'll take you to the common room." Harry fell into the line. The moving staircases and shifting portrait panels made navigating the castle confusing. Without Percy's guidance, he'd have gotten lost for sure. After what felt like a long, winding walk, the line came to a halt. Just when Harry thought they must have arrived, a short, plump, middle-aged-looking man floated down the corridor and blocked their way. He wore a bright suit and a small blue top hat and grinned with complete mischief. "That's Peeves," Percy whispered, "a poltergeist who specializes in pranks." Peeves shouted, "Welcome!" in a sing-song voice that echoed off the stone. Then, with a wicked grin, he lunged at Percy so fast he was almost invisible. When he reappeared in front of the group, he had a small, glittering object clutched in his hand. 39. Peeves and Speedy Imprisonment. Percy was the first to react. He frowned, reached up to his chest, and his expression changed instantly. "My prefect badge." There was a flicker of panic in his voice as he looked up and saw what Peeves was swinging by the string. Percy's prefect badge. "Looking for this?" Peeves cackled, theatrically tossing the badge high into the air. Just as it was about to fall, he pinched it between two fingers and caught it with a flourish. "Give it back, Peeves," Percy demanded, his face tight with anger. "Do you want me to go find the Bloody Baron?" "You're getting anxious," Peeves taunted, ignoring the threat. He loved making a scene. Percy drew his wand, furious, but Peeves only laughed louder, flinging his limbs and making exaggerated faces. "Spells are useless against me," he mocked. "What are you going to do, Mr. Prefect?" Percy's scowl deepened. He knew Peeves was right. Normal spells had no effect on poltergeists. Then a voice from the back of the line spoke up in mild puzzlement, and Harry recognized the tone. Vincent was walking toward them at a leisurely pace. "The corridor's not for resting," Vincent said in his calm, unhurried manner as he approached. "What's going on here?" When he reached the front, Vincent saw Percy and Peeves in a standoff. He stopped smiling. "It's you, Peeves. What mischief now?" He looked at the poltergeist with a seriousness that made Peeves' grin vanish. "It's you!" Peeves blurted, suddenly taken aback. His face went very pale, and he floated backward as if trying to escape. Percy seized the moment. "Professor, he's holding my badge!" Vincent's wand was in his hand almost before Percy finished speaking. "Full body bind curse," he said crisply. From the tip of his wand flew an ordinary-looking rope that looped around Peeves and coiled tight, tying him up neatly with a bow at the side. Peeves flailed, shrieking, "Let go of me! Let go of me!" Panic threaded his voice. He couldn't understand why Vincent's spell should work on him. The ropes didn't just hold him, they prevented him from exerting any force. The sensation dragged him back years to the last time Vincent had dealt with him. How many years ago? 6 or 7. Vincent couldn't destroy Peeves. No one could. He could only bind him. Compared to the most powerful spellcasters, Vincent's other talents were average, but the full body bind curse was his specialty. While most wizards could summon a single rope, Vincent could call chains, iron links, thorny vines, even bindings that trapped ghosts. Once, during the dragon test, he'd used a long chain of magical iron to restrain a creature transformed by transfiguration. He had a mastery of binding that few could match. Peeves eventually stopped struggling and slumped to the floor, deathly pale. Percy's prefect badge fell at his side. "I surrender, sir. Do with me as you please," Peeves whimpered. Vincent couldn't do more than restrain him for a time. The work cost him a good deal of magic, so he usually left Peeves tied for only a few hours as a stern reminder. It never lasted. Peeves's love of mischief was ineradicable, but it bought peace for the moment. Vincent picked up the badge and handed it back to Percy. "This yours, Prefect? If you value it, keep it on you." "Thank you, Professor Vincent," Percy said, relief and embarrassment warring on his face as he accepted the badge. As Vincent finished, the line of new students erupted into applause. One clap, then many, until the entire queue was clapping. Vincent bowed with a smile and said, "Thank you, but I must be off. If Peeves bothers you again, find me and I can tie him up for a few more hours." He sheathed his wand and began to walk away from the line toward his office. Passing Harry, he reached out, patted his head, and leaned close to say, "Thank you for the applause, Harry." "You're welcome," Harry replied, still buzzing from the excitement. Vincent's rooms were connected to his office, and when he opened the door, he found 2 sheets of parchment waiting. Professor McGonagall had already prepared them. One was his class schedule. The other was the list of students who had chosen Care of Magical Creatures. Care of Magical Creatures was one of the easier subjects to teach at Hogwarts. It was an elective with relatively few students, and only 3rd years and above could opt in. In most years, few students beyond 5th year continued the class. This year, there were none. For most pupils, the course was taken for the OBULs. After that, only those who loved it or needed it for NEWTs kept going. That reality gave Vincent a light teaching load and plenty of free time he intended to use for his own research. He reviewed the schedule and the student list, satisfied. His first day at Hogwarts had gone smoothly. 40. The growth of the Tree of Wisdom. It was the 2nd day of term. Perhaps because of the change of surroundings, Vincent woke unusually early. Outside, the sky was still dark and the stars were thinly scattered. The room was quiet, except for the occasional hoot of an owl. He sat up, rubbed his forehead, still not quite used to this place, but he moved with purpose. He reached under the bed and pulled out the suitcase he'd left there for the interview. Gripping the handle, he flipped it onto the floor. The case thudded, folded itself open, and in seconds a door stood upright in the center of his room. It was a backup doorway to his plantation. He'd tested it before. Apparition didn't work at Hogwarts, but his portal did. The frame was made from mutated wood with a space positioning property. It had nothing to do with apparition. This was a closely guarded secret. A doorway like this meant he could bring people in and out of Hogwarts at will, an obvious security risk. If Dumbledore learned of it, Vincent was certain the door would be removed. The door opened without sound and Vincent stepped through. For safety, the external entrance had been placed beneath the Homping Willow. If anyone else tried to use it, Vincent could only hope the willow would deal with them thoroughly. Inside the plantation, dawn had not yet broken either. Lupin was off duty, so Vincent was the only one there. The Devil's Snare, sensing his arrival, reached out its vines and swung excitedly beside him like a delighted pet. "Don't get carried away," Vincent said, smiling as he pushed the vines away. "You want to come out with me?" "Not yet. There'll be time." The plant wasn't satisfied and kept tugging at his sleeve. Vincent relented. "All right, I'll take you out when it's light," he said, patting one of the vines. Since it had developed a parasitic attachment to him, the Devil's Snare seemed to enjoy the closeness and repeatedly tried to entangle him in hopes of being taken for a walk. It wasn't a bad thing. If anyone attacked him, the snare would be a useful defender. After calming it, Vincent walked to the Tree of Wisdom. Eldra, Tree of Wisdom. Species, Oak Level 3 Characteristics, Object Analysis, Soul Connection. Status, Growing, 99%. At last, the Tree of Wisdom had reached a critical point. From experience, whenever its growth bar hit 99%, it needed some catalyst to continue. The first time, back in his 5th year, shortly after his sister was hurt, the tree gained Soul Connection. The second time, after Vincent's travels, it learned Object Analysis. For this third surge, he suspected it might have something to do with Harry. The tree's growth changed only when it was near him. Those were only guesses, though. Vincent didn't know exactly what was required. All he could do now was wait. He spent the next while walking through the plantation, letting his magic flow into each plant so they would be affected by his mutation ability. When he stepped back through the portal into his office, the sky had begun to lighten. The Devil's Snare, true to its desire, had wrapped around his arm, Its web-like patterns showed through his sleeve, hidden beneath his robes. Vincent glanced at the timetable he'd hung on the wall and couldn't help a small sigh. He only taught 3 classes a week, one for 3rd years, one for 4th years, and one for 5th years, each lesson taught to all 4 houses together. No wonder Kettleburn had had time to research dragons. He'd seen McGonagall's schedule once. It had been packed without a spare moment. Compared to hers, his own hours felt almost lazy and more than a little embarrassing. Well, if he was idle, he might as well enjoy it. He left the office for the Great Hall. As he passed the familiar portraits, suits of armor, and winding staircases, a wash of nostalgia passed through him. The Devil's Snare was probably more excited than he was. Its vines kept sneaking out from under his robe to reach and touch things like an eager child. That came to an abrupt halt when they passed a suit of armor whose greatsword swung down and sheared off one of the snare's vines. The plant recoiled and learned to keep its distance from the armors. At the foot of a staircase, the steps split into 2 directions. Vincent frowned. He was certain the stairs hadn't done that before. A translucent figure materialized beside him, the fat friar, the Hufflepuff ghost, short and rotund in monk's robes. "Go left, Professor Vincent," the friar said kindly. As a Hufflepuff, Vincent knew and trusted the friar's cheerful, helpful nature. He mounted the left staircase and turned back to chat. "Do you remember me? From before, 6 or 7 years ago, when I was a student. Of course, my brain's not what it was, but my memory, oh, that's still much better than before I died. Ha ha!" The fat friar chuckled at his own joke. Vincent managed an awkward laugh to match.